Barbershop Talk. Good morning to you. Hey, did you get out and see the movie Harriet? You gotta get out and see it. It's a great film, not only about black artists and black films, but it's about America as a whole, this American hero for all of us, not only African Americans, minorities, the cause of civil rights, but our nation as a whole. It is a great film. I tell you what, additionally, it's great for kids. This film is great for kids, so get your kids out and see it. We don't see enough of minority heroes like this, and it's inspirational, so make sure you get out and see it. Well, welcome to Barbershop Talk. It is November 9th, 10 a.m. We have Dr. Jonathan Locust in the house to tell us all about what he's doing here at Winona State University. Then in our second show, we have D'Angelo Funches to tell us about the comedy show that's coming up. So welcome to Barbershop Talk. Get ready. Again, welcome Barbershop Talk. It's November 9th at 10 a.m. We have a great show ahead for you. We have Dr. Jonathan Locust, and then our second show, we have D'Angelo Funches. So you've tuned in for a great show today in a second show. But like we do, we like to cover what's going on in our communities because there's so much going on. We often don't know, particularly within our minority communities. So we want to make sure we do our part to get us all in the know on what's going on. So some great things going on. Too much to cover it all, but we will do our best to cover what's going on. One great thing that's going on in our community is that of the 8-0 Golden Gophers are going up against Penn State at 12 p.m. today. Make sure you support them. Penn State is about 5 or 6 on the AP poll. If the U of M at number 7 or 6 or 8 beats them, they will then, this is my opinion, become 5 or 6 in the nation, the highest ranking that the University of Minnesota has had for a long time. So make sure you cover or support your University of Minnesota Golden Gophers. Great times for the University of Minnesota Golden Gophers, so make sure you cover them. Then we want to say thank you to the great work that Superintendent Elstad is doing in the community of Owatonna, Minnesota. Upcoming, he has the Owatonna Community Engagement Series. On that day, they'll have How Do We Move Forward Together on November 21st. Great thing about that, we had them on our first show. Obviously, Owatonna had, if you know anything about Owatonna, they had the race problem there at the high school last year, and Superintendent came in this year, Superintendent Elstad, doing a lot of different things to help with those issues in the community. We want to applaud him for what he's doing in that community to deal with these issues. So get out to those folks in Owatonna that are concerned about the community and these issues. November 21st, the next series, How Do We Move Forward Together? Great job, Superintendent Elstad. Thank you again for coming on the show. Let us know how we can help you. And then we want to say something about our Matthew Hurt, former JM Rocket last year, nationally ranked player, now playing for the Duke Blue Devils. His first national televised game was this week. He scored 11 points and 2 rebounds. The Post Bulletin, they are covering Matthew Hurt's stats. So if you want to keep up on Matthew Hurt and how he's doing, just get into the Post Bulletin. They'll show you how good he's doing from stat to stat. Last night he played Colorado State, so check out the Post Bulletin on how he did last night. Great job, Matthew Hurt. Come and see us when you're back in town. Then tomorrow, the Rochester Jazz Fest is going on. It was great last year. Should be great this year. Make sure you get there if you love jazz music. And then on November 15th, we have the Funk and Funny. I want to make sure I say that right. Funk and Funny comedy show coming to Rochester. D'Angelo Funches will be on our second show today. That comedy show is coming up on November 15th. So if you love comedy, it'll be at the Rochester Civic Theater on November 15th. And then future shows, we want to make sure you know what's coming up. Next week, we have 2 shows like we do today. November 16th, we'll have Regina Mustafa and some from the Somali community coming out and talking to us. And then our second show will be Senator Dave Sinjum. And then on November 23rd, we'll have managing attorney Lori Traub out to see us here at the Barbershop. So that's some great stuff coming up. There's more things going on. Check out what's going on else in our community.
Greenhouse Graphics, we offer award-winning design services at affordable rates to help your business attract customers and ultimately affect your bottom line. Working with you one-on-one at whatever stage you're at in developing your brand. I want to help drive success to your business with excellent design and quality marketing materials. From startup companies in need of custom graphics, websites, logos, to seasonal maintenance, I got you covered. I take time and listen and care about your needs. I understand that image and quality mean everything in business when it comes to leaving a lasting impression on your clients and customers that lasts a lifetime. With nearly 2 decades of experience, it is in my DNA to create eye-popping graphics for your business. Greenhouse Graphics, making sure you always look your best.
All right, Barbershop Talk. As we do in the barbershop or the beauty shop, we talk about everything and we keep it real. We have our own segment in which we talk about topics in the barbershop. We have some fun with it. These are the topics we are covering this time around. The first one is load management. For some reason, this is a big topic in the NBA. These NBA players getting paid almost $250 million. Some of them just resting on the bench, resting their bodies and what have you. And we're paying big ticket prices to see them. What's up with load management? We'll talk about that. And then in Kansas City, they took down a Dr. Martin Luther King sign. Why did they do that? We'll talk about that, particularly in light of here in Rochester last year we changed East Park to Martin Luther King Park, and that had a lot of controversy around it. We'll get into that. And then we've added one more segment. You know that person in the barbershop or in the crew, right, that says some contrary things, perhaps just to be contrary, perhaps they are contrary, or maybe they're even right, but they say some crazy things that get you thinking and debating and what have you. Well, I'm entering myself as that crazy person, and we're going to enter another topic this week. And our topic this week is reparations is a dumb idea. Reparations is a dumb idea. So come with us. We'll chop it up on the barbershop about this. See you in a bit. Barbershop Talk. It is November 9th. Thank you for tuning in. We are privileged to have Dr. Locust here, and we'll get into it thick with him. The whole family's here. We got Jonathan Jr., is that right? The third here. And Mrs. Locust, Jasmine here. So we have a great show today. We also have Andre here from Mayo. He's hiding in the background, great brother. We'll be talking with him at a later show, but he's here. And obviously we have director Andre Crockett, Bud Whitehorn co-host, and the man with the plan, Mr. Gill, cutting heads today. So thank you for tuning in. And as we do, we're going to go straight to our Keep It 100 topics. And our first one is load management. It was all over the NBA and ESPN and talk shows. Gentlemen being sports from Cleveland. Ooh.
I feel sorry for him.
From out east, Bud from Chi-Town, from Indianapolis, Indiana. What do y'all feel about load management? These guys are getting paid almost $250 million chilling on the bench. What's up with that?
Personally, I don't see anything wrong with it,
right,
because it uses strategy. At the end of the day, we know that ultimate goal is to win a championship.
Right.
And you know that their body can't be weighed down when it means the most to the organization.
Right.
Is this referring to Kawhi?
Kawhi Leonard.
Yeah.
Screwing it all up. What's up with that dude?
Yeah, he set out 2 national televised games.
And that's the issue, isn't it? Nationally televised games, you're supposed to go up against Antetokounmpo. That's a hard thing to say.
Yeah.
And he sat down and then he played the Blazers the next night. What's up with that?
Well, I mean, honestly, I don't see a problem with it either, because you see you see in all the pretty much a lot of the sports areas where athletes, their bodies begin to break down.
Yeah.
You see what happened in boxing.
Right.
So you see where all these different these categories, specifically a lot of African American males,
Right.
they get to the point where their bodies are no longer viable.
Right.
So being able to see that forthcoming, then why not preparing ahead to make sure that once you get to your 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, you can still walk and think.
Yeah, that's good.
I
Jay
think
Will
it's
made a
smart.
good argument on Get Up, saying these athletes, they start when they're young, AAU, by the time they get to the NBA, their
Yeah.
bodies
Beat
just
up.
can't take it.
Yeah, I think it's smart. Like you say, it's a strategy. Look at boxing.
Yep.
Look at boxing. Who lasts the longest? Is the people that don't take the most hits.
The greatest, Marvin Hagler. We gotta have that debate one day. Boxing, who was the greatest boxer ever since? But that we'll get into that. Our next
We'll
topic
get into that some
is
other time.
Kansas City took down their Martin Luther King Street sign. They're one of few major cities that do not have a Dr. Martin Luther King Street. They voted on it, they put it up, and then they took it down. It was 70 to 30. They took the street sign down. Sounds a little, a lot of, sounds like it's a really bad situation racially, but across the board, they voted to take it down. It was in the hood, so on and so forth, but they voted it down, and now this major city in Missouri does not have an MLK Street. What do y'all feel about that? And then we're going to get into what we dealt with last year, Bud and I on the committee to get street here.
So, I guess my first question would be, how did the people of color in that community feel? So that would kind of be my first question, because they may have insights to information that we just don't
That's
have.
true. That's true.
Beyond that, not knowing that information, I think people's names and histories and placement is very interesting. So if Dr. Martin Luther King Street Boulevard, and there it was in the hood, and I can even recall even in Cleveland, Cleveland, that street is also in what we would consider the hood.
Indianapolis too, yeah.
So when you think about it, as far as
Chicago too.
how come that maybe couldn't be in another prominent area? So,
Right.
I think that there's a lot of hidden messages and a lot of things that we see, and this could be another hidden message of associating Dr. Martin Luther King, as great as he was, with an area that is not what he wanted to.
Right. That's true.
I mean, I read up on it a little bit. I think that, again, that they felt that someone was at the table, but the voice was not being heard.
Right.
And I think that's what we typically face not only here, but across the country.
Right.
Right. You know what I'm talking about? Our opinion really don't count.
Right. Well, we had a similar battle here. Bud and I were on a committee last year to bring a street here in Rochester, the third largest city in Minnesota. It was voted to do a park. That park is in East Park, what people consider to be the hood of Rochester, which there isn't one really. So there was some controversy, as you would think, dealing with the Parks Board and the City Council, but there was also controversy within our minority community. Why are y'all putting this MLK Park in the hood, quote unquote, of Rochester? So it's Bud's fault. No, I'm joking. No, but we as a committee did this, and it's interesting. Now there's a little bit of controversy on why did we put it in the hood. Any thoughts on that, being members of South Minnesota?
I mean, for me, you know me down there. I always I don't think I have a problem being in the hood, because they really don't have images.
Right.
Anyway, to look up to, right? And I think that could be a teachable moment,
Absolutely.
especially for our kids who don't know history.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
All that he fought for, and why you're doing some of the things that you're
Right.
doing.
Right.
Even if you put it in a prominent neighborhood, they know of Martin Luther King probably more than our kids really know of Martin Luther King.
Right. Exactly. And that was the reason, and Bud can speak to it too. Rochester is not flooded with minority imagery, positive images, so on and so forth. So in a sense, we were happy just to get it. We were happy just to get that opportunity to have that. If it was one of our major cities where it's total hood, and we would have probably retracted that.
Yeah, I think it's a start.
Right,
You know,
it's a start.
We wanted to get something to have just something that points to something positive
Right.
with our minority figures. So
Right.
I think the park was a good one.
Yeah.
It's gonna always be somebody that's gonna find some type of
Right.
reasoning why it shouldn't happen. So
Right.
I think the good outweighed the bad on this one.
Right. I agree. And to speak forward on Kansas City, they're thinking about naming an airport or another street. There was some concern about it going through the hood and maybe renaming it somewhere else. All right, we're going to go to our next segment, and this is called, we just added this last week, Donnie You Crazy segment, and this is dedicated to that one dude or female in the barbershop that says crazy stuff that is totally off the wall. They're crazy. They do it just to be adversarial, or maybe whatever they're saying is true, but we can't deal with that within our culture. So here we go. This is a deep one. Last week it was Vanilla Ice, and I'm sure Dr. Locust, you would agree with that. Vanilla Ice has the best rap song ever.
Oh,
No, I'm
Donnie, you crazy.
we had fun with that.
That's right.
But this is a little more serious, and this is the topic. Reparations is a dumb idea. Ooh, see? Boy, you heard that.
Yeah.
Let me qualify my statement,
Let's talk about it.
if I can. I say that in this sense, and this is no disrespect to our current president, but obviously we know his views about diversity, so on and so forth. And this man was elected by basically a little bit over half of the country voted for this individual in office. Say, for instance, we get the idea of reparations passed. Can you imagine those folks that follow Trump, and I say this respectfully, particularly ones on the fringe, can you imagine what they would do if they knew some of their tax dollars was going to reparations? And that's why I say that. And I think there's some reparations-like things we can do as a nation to really speak to that. But let me tell you what's going on. And I bring this up to you since you're here, Dr. Locust. Georgetown University recently announced that they would raise $400,000 to pay for reparations as a college. Princeton Theological Seminary is following suit as well. So apparently, higher education is thinking about filling in the gap of reparations. What do y'all think about that?
So you really, as far as the idea, like you saying it's been a dumb idea, you're really asking like the question, well, do you think about, so there's no doubt that more than likely will cause a greater divide between different communities. We know that.
Right.
But then the question then becomes, do you let that be the rationale as to not to do it? Or do you let what a group of people feel like they're deserved lead that conversation, right?
Right.
And so I don't say that it's a dumb idea. I think that they're just, if anything, there needs to be a plan or even to do something. This is looking at it from an equity lens. As President candidate Andrew Yang is saying, like, just give everybody. Everybody gets that money. Now, I don't know if that necessarily as far as reparations, but at least that's from an equitable lens. But it's I think one of the things is with reparations, no one has actually really talked about a plan. It's just reparations, but there hasn't been a plan as to what that looks like.
Right. Director?
I'm just from institution wise and college and stuff like that. I think because of low enrollment and stuff like that, I don't think that they're doing it out of good gestures. I think they're doing it out of necessity. Because they never move unless it's stuff affecting the bottom line.
Right. That is. Yep. That's right. That's right. And that makes sense. In my opinion, there needs to be reparations-like things given the culture. Maybe in the future, it's not a dumb idea, but obviously, healthcare, universal healthcare, disparities, criminal justice reform, true criminal justice reform, and I'm very thankful for what's going on. Obviously, education, in my opinion, allowing at least that 2-year, that 4-year degree to be expedited or financed by the state or the government or whatever. To me, those things would help minorities and obviously African Americans get over the hump.
Right.
But I think when the Democrats, and God bless them, they're throwing around the topic of reparations, it's kind of like, I say this respectfully, Senator, the one presidential candidate that's talking about this huge health care plan, but is not really putting the numbers to how it's going to really happen.
So I got a question on that. is this welfare reparations,
Yeah.
or is it affirmative action?
Ooh.
'Cause that's what the people want to know.
I think. Okay, I'm going to get in trouble here. I think the extreme conservative side would label it as welfare, just to not get it passed. But I think it's more of a civil rights affirmative action type of scenario. That's my opinion, loosely said.
Well, I think you're absolutely right as far as how would it be messaged by, we know, our two major media outlets.
Yeah.
So I think if, to kind of get to your point, if it doesn't really seem like people on both sides of the aisles are talking or communicating, right?
Right.
Because you could then look at solutions as to how we can solve both problems. So if we have one population who is concerned about, I don't necessarily think my tax dollars should be going to this point then,
Right.
but we know there's some historical injustices that have been done to certain groups of people throughout America. Then do we say that these groups that have experienced these injustices, they have to pay lower taxes than everybody else? Right. So there's creative ways that you can go about doing it, or you maybe just don't have any income tax.
Right.
And you look at creative ways to be able to solve the problem in order to make sure that the injustices are done, but we don't necessarily cause a larger divide with another community.
Right. Just so our community knows, the Council for Minnesotans of African Heritage, they are focusing on this issue in the upcoming policy summit. I think it's November 21st. They are talking about reparations as it relates to Minnesota. So this is an issue that's on the table up in St. Paul. So let's get into our show. But before we get to Dr. Locust, we want to say on our Veterans Day coming up, we salute you, our veterans. Thank you for what you've done for our country. Yes. We appreciate what you do here at Barbershop Talk. If we can do anything, and now that the director is doing as he impacts the whole community, let us know what we can do. Thank you, veterans. But we want to thank Dr. Locust, Associate Vice President of Winona State University of Diversity and Inclusion, for being on our show. Thank you for coming to our community.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
You've been in your post for about a year?
Actually going on 2 years.
See,
I
this is why we do what we do. And in the black community down here, we just don't know nothing.
just be saying stuff.
We got the show. This is why we got this show.
Yeah, exactly. 2 years.
Yeah, so we came January of 2018. Okay. Probably not the best time of year to travel.
Y'all got it, boy. Y'all got it good.
We got it, but so going on 2 years.
Wow. So tell us about your education background and what brought you to Minnesota.
Yeah, so I ended up graduating from the University of Cincinnati in Cincinnati, Ohio. I ended up getting a degree in organizational communications. Afterwards, I had pretty much been working in banking. Okay. So essentially I started with corporate diversity, which was really interesting. Really had liked that, but then I wanted to go more to the sales side. So after graduation, I was kind of told I was going to be in a management training program for a kind of a rotational program for National City Bank, and it ended up being the same time where PNC Bank out of Pittsburgh ended up buying them out, and they went on pretty much a hiring freeze. Right. So after that, I sold health and life insurance, which was really good. Really enjoyed that. Focused on communities of color, because I'm especially in instances where my father's also a pastor, so I've seen instances where there was a death in the congregation and the rest of the people were not able to actually pay for the funeral. So focusing on those communities who necessarily did not have health or life insurance. Ended up moving back to Cleveland and figured I kind of wanted to go into education, so ended up pursuing a master's degree at Kaplan University in higher education, administration, and leadership. Started working at a proprietary institution, and after learning about a lot of the targeting for specific populations and a lot of falsified graduation rates and career placement rates, it just wasn't a place where I really didn't want to work. So I ended up getting a job at Ashland University, which I was there for 7 years. I was in the role of overseeing diversity and inclusion, as well as student conduct, and as well as had some Title IX responsibilities as well. Ended up finishing a PhD, moving to Winona, Minnesota. Been in the role for again, going on 2 years, and also received a black belt. So I'm a certified Six Sigma black belt as well.
Yeah, see,
So
see,
focus
bud,
on-
you better leave it alone.
No problem. Hands up, don't shoot.
Wow. So given your role, and we knew that your predecessor, Hines, he's up
Absolutely.
in the Twin Cities now, as I understand it.
Yes.
Can you describe your role there at WSU and what it means to the South Minnesota community, students that want to go to the college and the community?
Yeah, so and having multiple opportunities to talk to Alex, who's a wonderful individual, and once I actually came, I would hear all these wonderful things about Alex, and asked the then administrative assistant who had served with him, do you think he would mind if I contacted him? She was like, absolutely not. So I was able to get his number, was able to talk to him on multiple occasions, and so even appreciate to him and shout out to everything that he did and he accomplished, because a lot of things I'm able to do now is because of what he did. So as far as the position, it's as the position was elevated to the associate vice president level, it's also a cabinet level position. So being able to make sure that inclusion and diversity and topics of equity are at the forefront of the conversations, and making sure that our institution are looking at as we move forward in the right lens. Also, it not necessarily dealing with, yes, still considering dealing with students, but also with faculty and staff.
Wow.
So
okay.
we're looking at how do we making sure that faculty, staff, the students are being trained. How do we make sure that they feel like this is a welcoming and inclusive environment, and then also extending beyond the institution within in the community to be able to really see how do we work in partnership with whether it's mentoring programs. We'll have some of our students, they'll mentor some of the high school students. So really trying to build relationships in the community. Also collaborating with, really trying to figure out how do we make sure that the Winona community, the city, is welcoming for the shifting demographics,
No doubt about it, yeah.
And by doing that, by making sure that specific people who did not have a voice at the table before are able to now have a voice at the table. So it's been really well. I think a lot of the initiatives that we're doing have been well received, and it's been a wonderful transition.
That's good. That's good. One of the things that we deal with, Andre and I, Bud, in the capacities that we work in, and part of the reason why we came together to do the show is the at-risk population.
Absolutely.
And their access to various things, not only education but other areas. One of the myths that are still out there that's kind of funny is that there are more black men in prison than college, and I think that myth has been debunked. But how do you deal with the at-risk populations coming to Winona State, and even in your previous position, how do you deal with at-risk folks coming to higher education?
Yeah, so I think for one, having to have an environment where they feel comfortable, because when you think about an institution, you have all these different people there, and for some people, and specifically referring to Winona State, for some people, that's the most diverse place they've ever been.
True. Yep.
For some people, it's the least diverse place they've ever been. So you have this wide gamut of experiences, and then people who have different levels of exposure. And we're asking all these people to come together, sometimes live in the same place.
Right.
And so with that being said, what we try to do is make sure that the students can have specific things that remind them of home, right? Or specific things that, for example, like, so we have, every 3 weeks, we have a barber that comes in to cut the males of color hair. These are things that help remind them of home.
DMC, are you hearing this? Oh, sorry, I did.
No.
DMC here, local. We'll get into that. So, Andre, my bad. Okay, go ahead.
So really trying to figure out how do we create an environment in the space where these things can happen, but also providing a space of creativity. Right. So we have a Keep Diversity Center where pretty much a lot of students from underrepresented backgrounds, they feel safe in that space.
Oh, that's nice.
And for them to be able to have a space, but some of the students, for example, were talking about the things they like to do as far as acting, as far as singing. They were just kind of just talking. And the conversation goes, I'm like, well, why don't we shoot a commercial? And like, So it's like, yeah, and like, let's use you all's creativity. We can actually shoot a commercial,
Right.
advertising the Keep Center, using you all's talents. You all do everything. So
Right.
being able to actually, I think a lot of times in specifically underrepresented groups, the culture has been suppressed.
Right.
Whether our expression of music, art, our expression in general has just been oppressed as well. So being able to provide avenues of creativity where these things and culture can actually live out, I think
Right.
provides just a better atmosphere for that at-risk population.
That's good to hear. Now, is Winona, they're responding to it in a favorable way?
Absolutely. So I'll even give you an example. Because one of the things when you look at culture, you want to see behavior changes.
Right.
Right? You want to see behaviors change. So last year we started our inclusive excellence strategic planning process. We wrapped it up this past June. There was somebody on the committee that I spoke to, which we got to become, I would consider ourselves friends at this point, and we kind of talked about not necessarily seeing his contribution because of his lack of experience with diversity, but we had the conversation of, even with your perspective, you still know what injustices, inequities look like.
Right.
So fast forward, I get a phone call while I was back in Cleveland, and this person said, I have an idea for a grant where we should upgrade all the technology in the Keep Diversity Center. That way there's touch screens, that way they can video chat, that way they can have notes, that way they can create presentations and stream presentations, even to our Rochester campus. I think that would be cool.
Oh, nice.
So for him, it was a shift in not necessarily seeing where I fit in
Right.
this kind of this community to this is how I can, from my perspective, affect change to make the campus more inclusive.
That's nice. That's nice. And what I've seen now, my second round of being a student, the campus. Not that it was horrible before, but it is evolving. If that's a good word to say.
Yeah, and I went to school down there.
Okay.
I graduated from there. And plus, I used to run back then, about 2 or 3 years ago, a mentorship program. But I ran it through Southeast Tech. So we used to talk, because most of my mentorship program is on college campus for a reason. When I was there, I know that it was a small percentage of the at-risk population going to St. Mary's and Winona State. So it really wasn't a true pipeline for, the at-risk. It was for those who, probably needed, just as a little support. But the main population, the fastest growing population down Winona is what we call high risk, right? They're the ones that's, filling up, the jail cells down, the behavior problems in schools and stuff like that. So if there's any initiative really to target those individuals, because those individuals are the ones who will actually stay in the community. The other ones that's doing well, it's not really going to go to a Winona State or St. Mary's because of their cultural experience within the community, right? They see very few African American males or females or anybody of color inside of their school system, running anything, and they'll be pretty much first generation college students. So one thing, when I was down there, I was trying to really say that, okay, we have to now get them on the campus. Early we can get on the because now that campus become a safe place, become a familiar place, and we know from research what happened is that there's kids on your college campus when it's come to make a decision, college time, right? They're gonna be able to do it.
That's right.
They're going to do it. So I commend you because I already know that. I know the atmosphere down there. I'm talking about. I'm an alumni there, and just to see some of the changes. But my heart and passion is that the at-risk needs to be focused on, because they're the ones going to change that community.
Absolutely, and even to add to that, we just had our campus diversity officers retreat at Austin Monday and Tuesday, and the chancellor came down and talked about the social and economic imperative for us to be able to close the graduation gap, the opportunity gap, as some people call it, because when you look at it, since the demographics are shifting, right? These campuses have to be able to make the institutions welcoming for people of color, right? And even when you look at
workforce development, and all of these different things that are really tied in. Campuses have to, and people who are in education, we have to be able to figure it out, but also it was discussed that being able to have to reach back and really work with our K-12 partners. Because if these students are coming to colleges with certain reading levels that are not college ready, then it's going to make it really extremely difficult for that professor to try to speed that up, or they just can't do that. They can't fill that learning gap that quick, right? So there's just a lot that really has to be done, and I'm having more partnerships between colleges and universities as well as the K through 12 to be able to get them introduced early. And one of the things that you talk about is, which I agree 100%, is getting them on campus early as possible. And we have a program called Hope Academy, where the students are there, and there's been a lot more of the students coming from the Winona community, which has been positive. So yeah, just really focusing on how do we actually close the injustices and the gap in those graduation rates.
Good. So you all do things. If I'm from, I don't know, Chicago, LA, whatever, and I want that somewhat of that feel, you guys are trying to do things to make folks feel comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely, and just provide an atmosphere where people smile at each other.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's the small things. Like, I mean, not necessarily like any like huge multi-million-dollar initiatives, but just being nice, just being genuinely kind to other people. And we had something this past spring. We had something called Kindness Week. And the whole idea was for somebody on campus to experience the act of kindness. And one of the things we did were, like, so the cabinet members were able to interact with students on a different level. We were able to, people would go to one of the coffee shops and some of the coffee had already been bought. We had free coffee and donuts. So we were really able to just have things where people experience kindness. People would get kind notes. And we just found out probably about a week ago through someone on the Inclusive Excellence Committee, because we did a lot of things, but what we didn't really factor in is what other people in the community were doing. And one of the people who is part of the committee said that she actually made, because she enjoys making custom earrings, she made 60 pair of custom earrings and put them different places on the campus. But nobody know, because that was her act of kindness. But she didn't want any credit for it. But she sees people walking around with the earrings, and she just feels good about that because that was her contribution. So a lot of it is, we want to be able to make sure at-risk populations are there and make sure they feel comfortable. But also, if we can also change the looking at just the culture of kindness, then a lot of these things will kind of just flow into place.
I read something about and this is the first time we deal with a lot of mentorship programs and this type of concept in criminal justice and what we do. But it was called the Valuing of Mentoring Program for African American Male College Students. And the idea was to give them culturally competent mentors to help them through the higher education process. And I thought, that's a notable concept, at least in that sense, because we talk about doing this all the time. Do colleges need to do that for, obviously, the 1 in 3 African Americans, males at least, that are in the criminal justice system? They don't have that ability to adapt or assimilate or whatever the word you want to use to a Winona State University or that college campus. Should there be specific programs for them, or it doesn't make sense?
Yes. So no, I think there has to be some type of, whether it's training, whether it's something to, because again, if you're mentoring someone. You're mentoring someone from your perspective, your biases, and so forth. And a lot of times we see or even a lot of books and literature that you read about mentoring, well, I always look to see, well, who is that written by? Right? And the majority of the literature is written by, white males, right? So a lot of those perspectives are from a white male perspective. So but that doesn't necessarily help if you're dealing with maybe an African American male student who with food insecurity issues. It's not going to work. So being able to have certain things that can prepare people to be able to speak more of a language, or to be able to to be able to just better communicate. That way they can better understand.
Right. I think it's a great idea, and it makes total sense because a lot of times, even in Rochester community, there's a evolution, acclimation, learning curve that a lot of folks that come here, if you don't get it, you leave.
Right.
And I'm sure at Winona State and various colleges in the South or even in Minnesota, particularly if you come from a high-risk, at-risk background, there's a learning curve you got to have to be able to, not only academically, but otherwise.
And I think that's true, and I think as far as having that training is important, but also not having something that's too intense where it can take away from the attributes of the person, right? And I'll give an example. I've been able to be fortunate enough to be mentored by a lot of different people from a lot of different races, religions, ethnicities, and so forth. So whenever I'm looking for a specific perspective, I can always get one. And as I was about to finish my master's degree, and I went to one of my black mentors, and I was like, well, I want to actually get something published.
Right.
So what should I do to get something published? And he goes like, well, here are some journal articles, here's what you can do, here's what you can do. So pretty much give me like a format of this is what you can do. It was great advice, right? Well, I then asked my white mentor, and my white mentor goes, well, what we could do is we could just create a publishing company where we can go in on a publishing company. That way, anything else you want to publish in the future, you can just make sure it's published. So I see that you're able to see two different distinctions of a person who's, and I think this is a lot of it is you just see just different lines of thinking, because I think it also leads to oppression as well. The kind of the perspective of go through this process to get somewhere, or to the other end of creating something to get to what you
do. The Tyler Perry plan.
Yes,
exactly.
That's why. See, that's why I tell people, kids, and people hear me. You need a black one, you need a white one, right? Because we can teach you how to navigate.
Right.
You see what I'm talking about? But because they never have to worry about the navigation part of it, right? Their mindset is ownership, because they had always owned, so it's always going to be ownership. So I tell kids, don't worry about playing basketball, own the team.
Right, absolutely.
That's right.
Absolutely, 100%.
Right? Tell them how to own something. Yes, you can go play recreation, you can shoot around, you can do everything you want to do, like Mark Cuban.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
But at the end of the day, you're right. That's why I said they need that different perspective, because if they don't get that different lens, we have to become limited.
100%.
Right? They can become very limited, and sometimes I think what hinders us the most is limited. We don't want to expand,
right?
Because we out of our comfort zone, right? But what college does, it teaches how to navigate in this real world, right? So we have to learn how to take maximize that moment, those opportunities.
Absolutely.
Right? Because that's all it really do. Right. It's not going to help us getting smart, really.
Right.
But the paper helps. Don't get me wrong. But it really helps us to get access to other avenues which we wish. We wouldn't be able to give to. So we see the difference of those who have had the exposure and those who haven't had that exposure. And so, how important has mentoring been to you?
Oh man, I mean, I can say that it's completely has changed my life, changed my perspective on things, and I can say like I was been fortunate enough to have a wonderful father in the home. So I mean, I was one of my friends who had a dad who I think was good to the point since he was a pastor. I was in church 6 days a week. I mean,
old school.
I was
getting too much trouble.
Me too.
Yeah, no, it wasn't too much trouble, but
getting in trouble, getting in trouble. You had 6 days.
6 days a week, but I looked at some of the differences between my other friends whose fathers were pastors, and since for my dad, if you performed well academically, then you could pretty much kind of do what you need to do. You wanted to go out with your friends, you can do that, but if the grades aren't right, you on hold, you're not doing anything. So first and foremost, like I had a really good dad that was there, and a mom that was, rest in peace, but was always very, very supportive. But even moving towards the mentorship, I had a black mentor that was extremely helpful and was able to teach me a lot of things about civil rights and a lot of things that black people went through. And it being a responsibility to be able to help the next person.
Yeah.
So that right there was just really instrumental as like a foundational piece. And then I made reference to my white mentor who has been extremely helpful to the point of figuring out ways to navigate very complicated situations. Right? I mean, for example, of strategies that are really helpful. For example, him saying, okay, I'll serve on your thesis committee. That way we make sure that, and him knowing this is a person who is very competent of the things that people of color go through. So he's like, I'm going to make sure that a lot of those barriers don't even happen. So he served on my thesis committee, served on my dissertation committee, finished my dissertation in 2 years. So being able to have that resource. And even another thing, he also, as far as that encouraging to create, about 3 years ago, he encouraged me to start consulting and start the Locust group. And even with being able to work with him, he's a quantitative person where one of his businesses predicting jury outcomes, and has been able to really help me out as far as establishing and work with him on the cultural aspects of how bias plays out in jury outcomes, and even been able for me to be able to work with that, but also establish business and ownership and entrepreneurship. So as far as mentorship, it's been extremely helpful for me. And even when I do mentor students, I'm always asking about and trying to instill in them that portion of creation. How do you actually get to the point of making something, creating something, whether it's a nonprofit, whether it's a social something that you want to actually solve? How can you have something that you can actually pass on to either one of your relatives or some of your children? Because we want to make sure that we have stuff that we can pass on. And that's a lot of things that our community have not.